Perhaps either Q&A or.
Let it be.
Welcome everyone to our board meeting and town hall, virtual town hall meeting this night. We will begin by we need just to approve our agenda first of all tonight.
President, I'll make the motion that we approve the agenda as indicated. Second.
Okay, Connie Archibald has made the motion and Karen Cronin the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have our agenda. And now we're going to our action items, approval of real estate agent.
President, I would like to make a motion that we table the agenda item of approving and real estate agent until our next board meeting.
I'll second that.
Thanks, So, okay, Tiffany Summers has made the motion and Nancy Kennedy made the second. Sorry, Danielle, we'll get you next time, okay? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we've moved that to our next board meeting, which will be Wednesday, November 13th. So now we go to our information items, which is our virtual town hall meeting. And we will turn that over to.
I'll take it right to begin
the
with.
superintendent.
Okay.
Superintendent Carlson.
We'd like to, this is a virtual town hall meeting and we're hoping there are people out there that are listening. Our technician says there's 24. So we're happy that you joined us. That's a good group. We hope more join as we go on. What our plan is we're going to make the presentation that we've made about 10 or 11 other times. And as the presentation is going, you'll notice on your Zoom link that there's a Q&A at the bottom of the screen. And on that, and if you wish to ask a question, you need to just click on that Q&A, type in your question, and you'll be able to ask a question. We have a screen in front of us, so we're able to see that question. And as time is appropriate, sometimes it might be right in the middle of the presentation, sometimes it might be a little bit later, but the questions will come up numerically in the time frame that they were given to us. And so we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. Exactly when is going to have to be, kind of dependent on where our presenters are in that particular time frame. And so with that, like I said, we've had several town hall meetings, and Keith Meekum, the secondary assistant superintendent over secondary, is one of the presenters, and Heidi Jo West, the elementary assistant superintendent, are the ones who make the presentation. And we've got a PowerPoint presentation that we will start now.
Let's see, did you give me, this is great. So for everybody that's joining us virtually, thank you for being here. And we are excited to have, we're excited to have you here. And again, for those of you that might not be familiar with Zoom, at the bottom, there'll be if you cannot see the Q&A, it's in the ... You can click on that and look up and see the Q&A, and then you can go ahead and put your questions there, and then we will answer them as they come in. And again, we're grateful to have you be here tonight. Obviously, we have our school board members here, and they're willing to, if you have a question for them individually or an area, they certainly can pipe in and share that. We also have our directors of facilities, Corey Thompson, our director of special ed, Catherine Allen. We have our director of HR here. So we have some people in the room that can answer your questions as they come in as well. So we are grateful again to have you here. I just want to remind you that, in fact, I received today my ballot. They were all sent out, at least at some level, on Tuesday. And then depending on where you live in the county, maybe some need 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. They think they'll all be delivered by the 20th. And so you certainly can vote for this. I looked at my ballot and it's a front and a back. The front is, the President of the United States, governor, other, senators and et cetera. On the back page is where the bond is, and it's on the far right of the ballot. So as you receive that, certainly, you'll know where, to look. It'll be on the back of the page in the right-hand side at the very bottom corner where you can either vote for or against. And again, we would just ask that each of you vote by November 5th. So why are we here? We want to start off with just a little bond history. Here in Box Elder School District, we've been doing bonds for, I believe the math is 120 or 112 years. And that is really crazy. First bond was 180,000 back in 1912. And you can see over the years, the different bonds. I'm a little more familiar with 1950, 58, and 61 as our two high schools, at least some of them, some parts of it, as well as the elementary schools that we're talking about with North Park and Lakeview Elementary, as well as our middle schools. They were all built in that bond in 50, 58, and 61. And so that kind of gives you a little perspective of when those buildings were built and with what kind of money it cost to build those original buildings. As you can see, moving down, I just want to mention 1993. Oh, 1984 were the natatoriums at both ends of the district. 1993 was Paris Intermediate and Young Intermediate Schools. The 2007 bond, which was our most recent bond, 17 years ago, remodeled two high schools and built Fielding and Garland Elementary. And so that was the last kind of some history of our bonds. And now obviously the bond we're looking at this year is 220 million this year. I want Heidi Jo West to talk a little bit about, which one do you want to go on first here?
I would be happy to talk about this one, the bonds and how capital reserve money has been used. Let's start there while you answer the question in yellow.
Yeah, okay.
So this is the breakdown of how the district has used capital reserve funds to address projects across the district over the last several years since the previous bond. The previous bond, as you all know, was to cover the cost of the two high schools having additions. They weren't new high schools, they were additions, and not everything got addressed at that time. There were stakeholder groups that decided what would be put into that bond on each end, and they had a lot of input and impact on that. Unfortunately, there's still sections of those buildings that have unreinforced masonry that need to be addressed by this bond. And at the time, two elementary schools were built, Garland Elementary and Fielding Elementary. And a portion of the Fielding Elementary was paid for out of the QSC bond, and we used bond premium to pay for Snowville Elementary. But since then, we've been able to use about $65 million in capital reserve funds to address other building projects that needed to be completed. So that included the gymnasium, additions to an intermediate school on the south end and the north end, the Independent Life Skills Center, which is here in Brigham City, that allows us to educate our adult special education students. So that's where students from the age of 18 to 22, right, Catherine? 22? Yes. Come to attend and gain the skills that they will need to be independent adults through career, occupational therapy, as well as life skills for taking care of themselves. We've had the North Transportation Building was built, as well as Sunrise High School. Sunrise High School services students for alternative high from both ends of the district. And many of you are aware that Golden Spike Elementary was built using reserve. At that time, it was kind of a consideration of which school needed to be built next. Something we'd like to clear up is that the West Tremont property was purchased in 2017. So that property was not purchased with funds from the 2007 bond, and it was not promised at the time that the funds from that bond would cover the construction of a building on that property. This narrative on the right-hand side is from public record, which states how the bond money was intended to be spent and how it was spent. Something for our taxpayers to know and understand is that with bonds, we can only use those funds to build construction and facilities. We also have to prioritize and tell our taxpayers how that money will be spent so that we begin with the highest area of priority and move our way down the list. We cannot use the funds to do anything that's not written in the bond plan. We have both internal and external auditors, as well as state auditors that come in to oversee our funds and ensure that we spend them as they are allocated. So back in 2019, the school board and the Box Elder leadership team met to discuss which project would be built next. We understand and recognize that there was a lot of people who had been promised a building on the North Tremont or on the West Tremont site at that time, subsequent to purchasing the property in 2017. However, in 2011, Garland Elementary was built, and in 2012, Fielding Elementary was built. That put 2 brand new elementary schools on the north end within the last 12 and 13 years. The last 2 elementary schools to be built on the south end were in 1994, which is 30 years ago, and 2005 at 3 Mile Creek, which is 19 years ago. We had 3 buildings on the south end that had unreinforced masonry and 1 building on the north end with unreinforced masonry. In order to take care of the most inefficient, problematic buildings we had in the district, were really expensive to maintain and to pay utilities on, Mountain View and Foothill were taken into surplus and Golden Spike Elementary was built. The reason for that was it brought it so that those 2 buildings were no longer costing the district as much to maintain, and they were beginning to have problems as well. So that leaves us with 1 building on the north end, North Park Elementary, and 1 on the south end, Lakeview Elementary, that need to be rebuilt and reconstructed in the elementary schools because of the unreinforced masonry. It also made it so that we have 2 other buildings, the middle schools, which everyone is very aware have needed to be rebuilt for a number of years now.
So, another thing I think it's worth noting is as part of this, reconfiguration, as we, rebuild the middle schools and bring 9th grade over to the high schools, is that back in 2007, when we had the bond for the remodeling of the high schools, not all of the high schools facilities were changed out. For example, at Bear River High, the gym is still the gym. The auditorium is still the auditorium. The language arts and science area to the north part of the building and some special ed rooms are still part of the old building. At Box Elder High School, the gym, the small gym, the auditorium, they're still part of the original, but a whole bunch of classrooms were built. And again, those were all based on a committee of individuals that made up of stakeholders, of community members, teachers, staff, administration, working with architects to decide what we could do. So part of this, as we reconfigure our grades, is bringing the 9th grade over, and we are looking at replacing more of the building that was not replaced back in the 2007 bond. Again, there's no intention right now to replace the auditorium or the gym, but we are going to replace more of the classrooms that are in need of updating due to the unreinforced masonry. So I apologize for just a second. That will be, because I was listening to this, so.
I did not address that.
Okay. One of the things, and we actually had a question come in, is we currently have 4 transitions. And in fact, if you live in Willard Perry, you have 5. We have a K1, and then they go to Perry. 3 Mile Creek is grades 2 through 5. But most of our reconfigurations or our transitions right now are K5, 6, 7 at our intermediate schools, 8, 9 at our middle school, and 9, 12 through, or excuse me, 10, 12 through our high schools. Research has shown that the more transitions you have, there is a hit to learning. And so our intent is, and again, we did some pre-survey with parents, community members, likely voters, and 81% were in favor of taking away one of those transition times. Also, if we can take away a transition time, it also can save us some time between the secondary and the elementary start times. And so that would be a positive that we would have because of this situation. So again, are we overcrowded? I want to say that our elementary schools, we used to have several schools that you could, in August, transfer your kid to. And the reality is now all of our buildings, especially up north, are closed. Buildings closed, Garland's closed, North Park's closed, McKinley's closed, Century's closed, Lakeview's closed, and the only one that's not, and Discovery's closed. The only one that's not closed is Golden Spike and 3 Mile Creek. So clearly, we've got to find a way to deal with this overcrowded, the lost learning spaces that have occurred. We do have 34 portables. 8 of them are at North Park, with probably 1 more to come. And Lakeview has 6 portables with really no place to put there. We do have some portables at McKinley. We also have portables at Box Elder High, Bear River High, Box Elder Middle, Bear River Middle. Box Elder Middle actually would have had some portables. They've just lost 5 classrooms inside where they've combined special ed classrooms. They've also taken every computer lab out. And so instead of putting portables, they've actually just shrunk learning spaces to accommodate for growth that has gone into those buildings. So anyway, that's sort of our need. And we've been looking at this for several years, and the board has worked really hard the last 2.5 years, specifically to talk about what would be our best financial situation and what would be the best way to meet the majority of our needs. So the question is what do we do for solutions? And hold on just one second. There we go.
David? All right, one of the things I want to thank again, sorry about the pause there. We're just trying to be most effective here. We're up to 43 individuals. We are so grateful to have you here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Since you may have missed the first part, some of you, please note that at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a ... If your Q&A doesn't show up, then please go into that and click it and type in your question. As soon as I get done with this particular slide, then we're going to go ahead and start taking questions. And there's lots of presentation we could go, but really your questions are most important to us. But here's what's going to make up the $220 million.
We are going to reconfigure if the bond passes to a K5, 6-8, 9-12. However, Willard and 3 Mile Creek, that decision is,
Yeah.
we cannot make that tonight. We don't know what the enrollments are gonna look like. Willard, we know is too small to go K5. But whether or not there's a K5 at 3 Mile Creek, really will depend on our 5th priority. But, here's what we do know. By reconfiguring, it actually follows our Utah Core grade bands, which are K2, 3, 5. That would all still be in the elementary. Our 6, 7, 8 would be in the middle school, and our 9 through 12 would be the high school, where all the graduation requirements, all the activities, both curricular and extracurricular, and we're excited about this process. And so our first thing would be to build 2 new middle schools. And right now, the priority of the board is to build those on different locations than where they currently stand, which means some of this, and by the way, 144 million is not going to be the cost of land. Land is much cheaper than that, but the buildings are roughly $70 million each, according to architects and building construction companies. And so that's the majority of that money, where a couple $1 million for land, which is yet to be purchased, but is being looked at. The second priority is obviously bringing the 9th grade over to and adding additions to the high school and upgrading some of the other existing classroom spaces on both ends of the district. And then obviously in all of this, we still haven't dealt with North Park and Lakeview. And so by moving the 9th grade to the high school and the 6th and 7th grade with the middle school, now we have an empty Harris Intermediate and an empty Young Intermediate. And that then can become the home of North Park and Lakeview Elementaries. Now, those schools are bigger and can accommodate a lot more people than what is currently going to North Park and Lakeview. So this also allows us potentially to move around some programs and, if necessary, adjust some boundaries to alleviate the stress at Fielding, Garland, and McKinley, and Century, Discovery, and Golden Spike, and 3 Mile Creek. And so that's kind of the plan. We have heard from our constituents that air conditioning all the schools would be awesome. Just so you know, all the new schools that are going to be built will be air conditioned. ACYI and Harris Intermediate are currently air conditioned, so therefore Lakeview and North Park will be air conditioned. But we do have a couple of other elementaries and 1 high school that needs to have some work on that, and that obviously would be our 4th priority. And the last thing is we recognize that Century, which was built in 1964, that has had 3 remodels, that is built with reinforced masonry, but there is a portion, I think it's the main office area and the main entrance. We recognize that that's going to have to be replaced at some point in time. And so whether it's with bond money or whether it's with capital reserve in the future, we know that needs to be addressed. The same issues with growth at Discovery and or Fielding. And so that's kind of the need. I know that's a big number, $220 million is big, but that's where we're looking at for where we are right now. So what we'd like to do now is pause, answer some questions, and I can stop sharing, Dave, so that you can get, and we can go through that if that's all right. And then we'll come back at whatever questions will lead us to whatever.
Can you hear me, Dave, now? Can they hear me? Okay, so the first question we have, Superintendent Carlson is going to address. It's from Cassidy, England. If there's more houses being built and all of those new homes are paying their property taxes and property taxes go up every year, why is the bond being increased exponentially? Why the massive increase?
There's 2 or 3 parts to the answer to this question. First of all, your taxes have not gone up because the rate has gone up. Your taxes have gone up because the value of your home's gone up. The tax rate has actually gone down this last year. And each year the board has a decision to make, and whether or not to hold the taxing rate the same amount. And in the spring, they hold what's called a truth and taxation hearing. And that's when the board lets people know that, hey, we're going to hold the rate the same, which will allow the district to have more revenue from those local capital taxes. Right now, another part of your question is why is this such a massive thing? The taxes that you have now are not going towards building new buildings. The taxes you have now are just going to maintaining, to help with a variety of things, but they're not for new buildings. The only way that we can come up with enough money is to go for the general obligation bond. We don't use the term GO bond or general obligation very often, but that's what this is. And that the general obligation bond means we have to go to the taxpayers and ask for permission to tax them more to be able to build these buildings. And $220 million, there's just no way we can do that to be able to replace 2 middle schools and to do the work at the high schools that we need, and then to do some remodeling, let alone the fourth and fifth options, which are AC, and then some work on those 3 elementaries that were mentioned. And so it's just too big of a lift to try to just use our local taxes. And so I know it's been really difficult for folks to understand, and we've answered that at almost all of our town hall meetings, is they see on your, just as mine, the value of my home goes up, even though the tax rate goes down a little bit because the value's gone up so much, I'm paying more taxes than I was the year before. And I know that's not a popular answer, but that is really what the answer is. And then the bond is $220 million, and we have to ask you guys if you'll approve it to be able to build these buildings. So I hope that helps.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to some of the questions that have been answered in the question and answer bank too. Would the board consider moving away from standards-based grading for grades 6 through 12? Keith?
Yeah, so right now, if you're actually talking about the grading portion, grades 6 and 7 are still part of the K through 7 standard-based, competency-based on a scale of 0, 1, 2, 3. Grades 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are a standard traditional grading practice right now. There has been some discussions keeping letter grades, but actually having grades represent the actual how much do you know per the standard instead of practice and homework and participation and all those types of things. So that is in a discussion, but currently grades 8 through 12 are traditional grades, A minus, B plus, etc.
Okay, will Willard and 3 Mile Creek be reconfigured to K-5 at each school? So the bond proposal is to build buildings where it doesn't address the reconfiguration of grades at Willard and 3 Mile Creek. This is something that will be discussed depending on the enrollment numbers in the next few years. Willard is too small to hold students K through 5. However, there's other possibilities there that stakeholders will be able to give input on in the future. Next question is, did the high school masonry get reinforced in the remodel? We're assuming that's the remodel of 2007 bond.
Yeah, obviously all the classrooms that were built, which was most of everything except for the auditorium and the big and small gym and CTE were remodeled, thank you, with reinforced masonry. And yes, the question might ask, what about those 2 big facilities and why aren't they? And right now, obviously it's a concern. We felt like there are greater needs right now, especially at our 2 elementary schools and our middle schools.
Is this the only option being considered? And if this doesn't pass, are there other options that have been explored, like adding a 3rd high school to the district in Willard or Perry? Would a board member like to take that?
I can try that too.
Yeah.
Is somebody-
Well, just as we look at our population, currently, the high schools are large enough to handle the current students, and if we add the 9th grade, we've made our allocations to add on those 9th grade learning centers. So we're okay high school wise, but elementary, we've got real issues. The age of the building, the structures of those buildings. We need those kids in a much safer facility than what they're in.
Thank you. Another question is, are junior high sports being considered as part of the grade reconfiguration? I believe there would be great interest in this from the community. Keith?
Hold on one second. I just wanted to double check I heard that right. It was-
Is junior high sports being considered as part of the grade reconfiguration?
That's a really good question. Obviously Utah High School Activity Association is grades 9 through 12. It's what we currently do. Weber School District has a 7, 8, 9 program, that hasn't been brought up. They have a league where it's kind of their 9th grade league though. It really is for 9th graders. And then if there's room, then 8th graders can play on that team. It's not like they have a 7th grade team, an 8th grade team, and a 9th grade team. But kids in 7th, 8th, and 9th can all try out for those 9th grade sports. Where we already have a 9th grade program, we don't see that necessarily being an issue for us at this time. But to your point, and to someone who loves kids being involved in good things, it would be nice, but it hasn't been a discussion at this point. And who they would play, Cache School District does not have 6th, 7th, 8th grade sports. And so really it's like, who do you play? Because Davis School District has a 7, 8, 9. Again, kids can play 9th grade, but we already have 9th grade. So we don't see that necessarily being it unless multiple districts wanted to create a 6, 7, 8 program in a variety of ways. But that at this point, that hasn't been brought up at all.
Okay, the next question is, what additions are being added to Century? Any new future elementary schools? So with this bond, the future elementary schools will be North Park Elementary will move into young intermediate with some rebounding. Sorry, Harris, thank you. North Park is Harris and Lakeview is young elementary, will move into young intermediate. At that time, we'll need to consider which programs need to be moved over to those schools in order to occupy more of the space and which rebounding would need to occur. As far as Century goes, it is the 5th thing on the priority list to consider what additions or changes may need to be made at Century Fielding and Discovery. We are aware that there is a portion of Century that has unreinforced masonry that will need to be addressed for safety. However, Century has a declining enrollment. A few years ago, they had an enrollment of about 500 students, and right now their enrollment is 440. Well, if they have more classes, three or 4 in the upper grades, and they're moving to fewer classes in the lower grades. Angela asked, would it be possible to rebuild the middle schools on the same land site versus purchasing new land? Corey, would you like to answer that?
You just come on. We don't bite.
As far as building on the existing sites, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But in discussions, the school board decided it's not optimal. The reason is you look at Box Elder Middle School, that current site is 11.5 acres. When you look at current middle schools being built, you need 20+ acres. And so it's a very tight site. Currently, Box Elder Middle School has 2 grade levels. The new configuration would be 3 grade levels, and so we're just compounding that congestion that's already there. On the Bear River Middle School site, that site is larger. However, the natatorium and parking lot are on part of that site. And to put 6, 7, and 8 in a new middle school building on the Bear River Middle School site means now we have 6th grade through 12th grade in a 2-block area, and we already have traffic congestion there with what we have, but to add 2 more grade levels on that side, we just feel like would be problematic. And once we build these buildings, we're looking 60, 70 years down the road before we would need to replace them. And so that whatever issues that creates would be there for most of our lifetimes. Does that, I'm hoping that addresses.
I think one thing to add at the Bear River situation is that every year we have problems with kids leaving Bear River and going over to the high school and vice versa. And it causes bike problems, it causes a variety of problems. So we feel for safety reasons, it'd be good to get the separation between the high school and the middle school.
And just one other thing I might add as well, it's a really good question. Right now, the recommendation for a middle school the size that we're gonna build is a 20-acre lot to 25. And I believe you told me, Corey, it's 11.7 acres is what our current Box Elder Middle School, and then Bear River Middle School is like 13 or 14.
Bear Middle School is 17,
Oh.
but that includes the natatorium.
Natatorium and all
the
that
parking
space.
lot.
So really, if you take off some of that, it's really both of them are not. I mean, yes, we could build there. But we believe that overall, keeping 6th, 7th, and 8th graders away from the 9 through 12 campus would be a better place for us if we can do that. Yeah, Connie has a comment.
And I think it's important for those living on the north end is that, as you all know, Bear River High School is landlocked. There really isn't any place to go. And so with this option, it allows Bear River High School to expand to the east and opens up that campus so that it's quite a bit bigger. So we're excited about that, to be able to expand Bear River High School and the land available of which to utilize as a high school.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Amy said, thank you for all of your hard work on this. Thank you for advocating for our children and helping provide quality educational opportunities for them. Thank you for taking the time to address our questions. And BB Smith asked the similar question that was just addressed. And then he also asked, have you considered placing the surplus label on North Park in Lakeview in order to sell those properties and take that money and place it towards the price of the bond?
So we cannot, as a board, surplus a building that is currently being used. It has students in it. We would not be able to surplus those buildings until they are empty. So that is 4 to 5 years down the road. As that money though, if at that time we do decide to surplus those buildings, we would, that money when we sell those lots or buildings for market value, because we have to follow state law on selling public land, taxpayer owned district land. We have to follow the bid process and the legal process that way, and they have to be sold for market value. And that money can then be put into the capital reserve fund for future projects.
I want to just address BB Smith. You asked, could these sites be used as kind of staging for construction? And I will just tell you that clearly our current, if we were to say which projects go first, our 6 through 8 middle school builds have to go first. If we can do that, then we can use our old middle schools to kind of help us as we're trying to have school still, and also building onto our situations where students that would typically, like the 9th grade students, could still stay at the old Bear River Middle School while we're building on to the high school, because we're not quite ready to bring everybody over. So I anticipate that happening on both ends of the district. So it's a great question. Next question is, will the auditorium and gym masonry be reinforced as part of the second priority? And at this point in time, that is not on the docket. Again, it's going to have to be addressed at some point in time, but currently is not. What will happen to the old middle schools? I think Danielle just answered that. Once they are vacant, we'll have to decide as a school board, what is, do we want to keep it? Do we want to sell it? If we sell it, Brigham City and Garland would have right of first refusal. And if they don't want to buy it at market value, then the board would send that out to the highest bidder. And then what that looks like. I will tell you that the plan for at least Bear River Middle School's property is to stay with Bear River High. We have no intention of selling that property. But Bear River Middle, on the other hand, or Box Elder Middle, it could be a discussion as well.
But we won't decide until they're empty.
Yeah, until they're empty, which is probably 5 years out. Oh, when the first bond is paid off in 2027, are we going to get a tax reduction since that bond and payment on the bond has matured? Again, BB Smith, great question. I'm going to show you a slide if you'll give me a chance to share. There's a slide that I can answer and a lot better than me. Let's see how this works. Boy, I've got a lot of stuff going on here. That's it. All right. BB Smith, here you go. Lower left-hand corner is our current 2007 bond. Obviously, we voted on 07, but we really didn't get going until 09. And that's why 2029 is when that bond comes off. I'll just tell you, currently right now, on an average home of $450,000, or whatever the average was at that time, it costs $9.08. So if you look in the kind of the left side of the screen, a month. And that is what patrons are currently paying, plus or minus, depending on the price of the home, $9.08 a month. So your question is now the red portion, when we get into this new bond, are we going to see a reduction? And I wish I could say yes. But the answer is, in order to accommodate for what we need for this new $220 million bond, we're going to take the green, $9.08, and then the 1986, which is the average price right now for a $450,000 home. And you're going to see how it kind of jumps up a little bit at a time. And then by 2030, the old one's gone, but we need that 908 add on to 1986 to take us just under $29 a month. So, and you can see the red is all the way to 2045, and then we start bouncing that down. So it's a great question. I wish we could say that it's going to come off. It will come off, but we're actually taking it to the new bonds so that we can meet the need of the current price, which that's the market we're in right now.
Is there a plan in place if the bond is passed and there is a market correction downward where property values go down and tax collection in turn is reduced? Will that threaten the solvency of the bond, or will there be a need to raise taxes again to cover the difference?
I think what the answer is to this one is that this is revenue based, and Zions Bank has done the figuring of the numbers to be able to get that, as you saw in the previous slide from Mr. Meekum, that red payment that we have to pay on that yearly basis. If the scenario that you proposed, Mr. Smith, does happen, the bond payment will have to go up. The taxes will go up. And so that's something that has to occur to make that happen. How much that is, I don't know. I do know that I was in a previous district that had a bond going on during the 2008 downturn, and I never heard anything from taxpayers about their taxes going up, and I didn't notice it on my own. And so I don't know how much of a housing market problem we'd have for that to be realized, but it is a concern. It's something that, you know, we all worry about. So it's something we just hope and pray doesn't happen.
The next question is from Malia. From the north end, how are you going to add on to Bear River High School? There's no room around it. Also, what are you going to do with the vacant schools? Old Garland Elementary School has been an eyesore for years.
Okay, so I was asked to address this one, at least the first part. The way that we typically address buildings is that we first obtain an architect. We've already done that for the two middle schools. So I would go out, follow state procurement rules, obtain an architect, and then with that architect and a committee, which the committee would consist of school board representation, district level representation, school representation, and stakeholder representation. We can
Stakeholders being parents, teachers.
stakeholders, yes,
Yeah.
yes, so that we get some buy-in and some say. How we would add on to that building, I couldn't say right now because we haven't gone through that process. I've looked at the property and have my ideas, but those are just my ideas, and we'd get an architect along with that committee that would then address that. Bear River High School is a small campus compared to what we would have now if we're building a brand new high school. However, we do have 7 acres on the north end of Bear River High School that's across the street. And then we do have the Bear River Middle School campus that is adjacent also. So there are some options. It does seem tight. Some options are, of course, better than other options, but we would need to go through that whole process. As far as the next, would that be better for a school board member to address?
The next question.
Probably, no, just the second part
Yes.
of that.
Old Garland Elementary School has been an eyesore for years.
Connie,
Connie or Tiffany or Wade.
I wasn't around.
Okay, so the Garland School, the old Garland Elementary, yes, it is an eyesore. Anybody that drives by there would know that. But what we do know is that the owner of that building currently has spent considerable amount of money to change the look of that building so that it's better for us. I can tell you that the adult, what we call the adult daycare that is currently on Main Street in Tremont, Utah, those young people will be moved up to the Garland School once the remodel has been completed, which should be soon. And then those, the other half of Garland Elementary will be used, this is the old Garland, will be used as Lakeshore Distribution's childcare. So the grounds will be cleaned up. The inside is already been remarkably improved. And it's going to be amazing. The owner has assured me that he is working very diligently in an effort to make the old Garland Elementary into a place that is reparable and something that we can be proud of.
Can I just comment or ask actually Corey to comment and maybe explain the process of what we as a school district and school board legally have to go through when we do sell a property? We don't choose what happens to it after it's sold, but we have a responsibility to get the highest bid, the most monetary value out of it that we can, because it's taxpayer dollars. So I don't know if that ought to be explained, what that process is.
Mrs. Wright already began to address that to some degree.
Right.
Once the school board determines that a building is no longer needed by the school district and makes it surplus, yeah, then the first step is going to the local municipality and they get first right of refusal. If they decline, then we put it out there, I guess, for a bid process. I would say though, on a typical elementary sized building, we're looking at about $300,000 for us to demo the building. And so that's something that the school board would determine if that's a route they would want to go or to sell it intact. That's something that we're not deciding tonight or as part of this bond, because those decisions are several years out into the future.
But we as a board have known the old Garland School for years. And people keep talking about it like it's ours. And we sold it in good faith that they would maintain it and take care of it. It is not our property. We'd like to see things look good. We'd like to see things cleaned up.
The same with Corinne and Mountain View. The school district no longer owns those. They have been sold and the owners of those property are responsible for the maintenance of them.
And the next question is from Keevan. One of the costs on the first priority is purchase land. Why would there be a need to purchase land to build new middle schools? Are the new ones going to be in different locations?
Hey, Keevan, thank you for this question. We have touched upon it earlier. The reality is our first priority is to build the middle schools in a different location to increase the property size, the acreage, up to hopefully around a 20-acre lot. The district does own some property on the south end of the district that would meet potentially that need, and that could be a decision that is made, or maybe there's a place we don't know about that might be more convenient to potential growth, etc. But that decision will be made following the bonds passing or whatnot. So up north, we do know that in order to give Bear River High School enough property for growth, etc., that we are going to for sure build a new middle school someplace else. So the land, again, we're estimating it, and that would be probably more priority up north than it would be down south, but we're looking at all options on both the north and the south because we're planning to build that in a different location.
Keevan.
Oh, yes.
Can I answer Kyle's iPhone question? This is particularly interesting to me. So Kyle, he says, have any of the new giant corporations moving into the county, such as Lakeshore Learning, been tasked with providing some type of impact fee to support the school districts? By law, the school district cannot impose an impact fee on any of the new builds that are coming in. The Utah School Boards Association has been trying to get, this has been one of our priorities for 4 or 5 years, to get the legislature to allow us to start charging impact fees, because it's been said in all of these questions and over, we have all these new buildings coming in, we have all these new children we're taking care of. But we, as a school district, cannot impose any impact fees. So call your legislator, please, because we're hamstrung. We are not allowed to take benefit of any of these buildings coming in, whereas the developers and the landowners can. But as a school district, we cannot charge impact fees. And the Utah School Boards Association would really like to make that one of the legislative priorities. Thank you. My soapbox for the day. I apologize.
Can I go back 1 second to building on the middle schools on different land? These schools need to be, we want to look to the future and have these schools be still usable 56 years from now. And the current land, they're already a little bit too small. And so there's no way to add on to those buildings if it's needed in the future for growth. So finding land that is the correct size will give us the ability to pick a building plan that has the option to add on to it in future use.
Thank you, Danielle. That actually speaks to the next question a little bit too, that in order from Derek says, when we look at the need, we talk about all of the overcrowding in the schools, yet part of the solution is to add additional grades into the existing schools, adding more students to the spaces. Can you speak to how this plan addresses this crowding in the near future and in the next 10 years? One of the ways that addresses the need for overcrowding is it allows us to use those intermediate schools for elementary schools that are bigger and allow more space for growth of population as well as for programs. In order to do that, then we need to have new middle schools, and rather than building new middle schools and new intermediate schools, combining the grades of 6th, 7th, 8th allows for that to happen. As Danielle mentioned, the lots are about the size, half the size that we need them to be for the middle school. So by purchasing lots that are bigger and more able to hold the appropriate size of the middle school, we have room for expansion in the future. We can also take it to the stakeholder committee that helps design those plans and helps give input on those plans and ensure that our architects create plans that allow for us to add wings on in the future for future growth. We don't want to build them so big that taxpayers currently pay for rooms that aren't used. And that also allows us, by putting the ninth grade at the high school, it's just the addition of a wing, which allows it to expand and make those buildings more efficient by having the grade bands together. Because that's the way curriculum is designed. If there needs to be a follow-up question on that, feel free to put it in the chat. The next one is Ginger. What will be happening to current buildings that have been outgrown? Schools like North Park, will we be keeping infrastructure in addition to new buildings? So once the bond goes through and those buildings have been built and replaced, at that point, we can consider them surplus. And I think we've spoken, Tiffany and Corey, a little bit to how that process happens. One of the things that is being considered by the current board that would need to be sustained by members of a future board at that event is making sure that the buildings are taking off of the land. And that's something that's under consideration for the future surplus of lots or buildings. Is there anything anyone would like to add to that? And the next question is, I'm extremely concerned about having 6th through 8th grade students together and 9th with 12th. 6th graders are still elementary students mentally, and there is data to back that up. 9th grader girls with 12th grade boys also seems risky. I'll start on this and then let Keith tack on anything he'd like to add.
Yep.
One of the things we did look at is the consideration of 6th grade going back down to the elementary schools. However, that is incredibly problematic for multiple reasons. The first reason is that curriculum grade bands flow 6th through 8th grade. Moving 6th grade down to the elementary schools would make it really difficult for the teachers within those grade bands to collaborate and create coherence and appropriate rigor in their lesson plannings to prepare the students for 9th through 12th grade. In addition, all of our buildings, our elementary buildings, are at capacity. Putting 6th grade in every single one of our elementary schools would mean that we would need an addition to every one of our elementary schools, which we just don't feel like is a good use of taxpayer funds. And
Not room on a lot.
there's not room on a lot of the land, and yeah, the buildings, and it would be quite expensive. Another thing we did was we went out to voter input on this and had focus groups, and 81% of the voter input suggested that they prefer the grade bands be moved to K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. That is a trend we are seeing in neighboring districts as school districts move towards the coherence of the grade bands. Also, research is showing that students in 6th grade are developmentally different than they were 20 years ago and more similar to their 8th grade peers than they are 5-year-olds. We had a lot of feedback from parents that they would be just as concerned with having 12-year-olds move down to the elementaries, where we have sometimes 3- and 4-year-olds for preschool and 5-year-olds in the buildings. So the feel of having them with students that are just 2 years older than them felt more appropriate. I'll let Keith answer the second half.
Yeah, and I'll also just kind of with the 6th through 8th, just so you know, there's not a class that a 6th grader will take that an 8th grader will take. There's not a class that a 6th grader will take that a 7th grader will take. So when we build these buildings, which have not been designed yet, but we've got a variety of options, our plan is to have 6th grade in its own hallway, if you will, or its own wing. So there will be very little interaction with a 7th or 8th grader. And if there is, again, what does lunch look like? We have some buildings that have 3 lunches currently. You could almost separate 6th in their own lunch, 7th in their own lunch, 8th in their own lunch, or we could do a 6, 7 and a 7, 8 lunch. And so kids that are just maybe 1 year apart and will probably be together. But in terms of classes, sharing classes together, the curriculum doesn't even match that. And so I know that can be a big concern, but we really, just so you know, currently 6th, 7th, and 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th are all on the same bus together if a bus is ridden. So they already interact now in places where we would think may be unsafe, and they are fine. Also, I want to add that, again, the 6th grade, we are sensitive. They're just coming out of elementary. And that's why putting them in their own wing and meeting their needs will be something will be a priority for us. As for the 9th grade with the 12th grade, this seems like a common thing that a 9th grade girl and a 12th grade boy seems risky. I would, I guess, venture to say that we don't know what they're doing social media right now. I guess we got to be careful that we're assuming that they never talk now when they have the ability to create an account and invite people to be their friends, whatever age. But I will tell you, similar to the 6th through 8th grade, Ginger, that 9th graders are going to be in their own wing. if you will. We're not gonna all of a sudden say all the 9, 10, 11, 12 are in the same math hallway. We are gonna build a ninth grade wing on both schools, and they will be in their ninth grade class in their ninth grade wing, and their language arts in their ninth grade wing, and their science in their ninth grade wing, their CTE in their ninth grade wing. There will be some common places. I do see the day that we're not gonna have one lunch. And just so you know, Ginger, I taught at Box Elder High School 100 years ago, and we had 9 through 12, and we had 2 lunches, and ninth graders were not eaten by the 12th graders, and they were all intermixed at the time. They actually will be less together now than we were 30 years ago when it was just 9, 10, 11, 12 in every hallway. So we really are planning on kind of minimizing their interaction as much as we can. And hopefully the good students that we have and the good parents that help these students make good decisions will continue to make good decisions. And just so you know, we're not going to tolerate the misbehavior or the inappropriate behavior that might occur. We're going to address that. If we see it, hear it, it's reported. And so I hope that we can take your concerns and maybe lessen them just a little bit.
Like, can you address how this helps ninth graders have more options?
Yeah, I'll just talk about, this is a very good question, Danielle. So I will tell you, having been the middle school principal, not recently, but just a handful of years ago, any ninth grader that wanted to accelerate. So if they had the ability in math, language arts, science, or athletics, or art, or musical, theater, anybody that wanted to be better, and maybe that's an area where they could extend, parents had to go to the middle school, I'm talking the south end here, they have to pick them up, they have to take them to the high school, and then they gotta wait there for an hour, and then pick them up and take them back to the middle school. Obviously at the high school up north, Bear River and Bear River Middle, they can actually walk across the street. But this idea of 9th through 12th really helps people that can accelerate. And also, on the same hand, those that might struggle, that might fail a class in 9th grade. I'll just use an example, geography. Geography is only taught in 9th grade. So what happens if a kid failed 9th grade? You're gonna have to find a way to make that up somewhere because Box Elder High does not teach geography. So if a kid was to fail a class, with this new reconfiguration, you could put them in a class that maybe they failed to get caught back up so they wouldn't have to take summer school or some online remediation course. So again, not to mention athletically, through the arts, music, all of these options, kids that can accelerate, we really feel like it helps them academically more and honestly socially and being connected more to a campus. All the 9th graders would like to be a part of games, etc. Right now, they're considered not part of the student body, and therefore, that's we think it's a positive.
Okay, the next question is, have any other funding sources such as grants been looked at to supplement the cost to this bond proposal? So yes, the QSC bond was used to help with building elementary, and that was a bond that was put out and made available during the time of Obama's tenure, right? That had a 0% interest rate that the district took at that time. Also to address Grouse Creek Elementary and the needs that we had there, we used a rural schools grant. So the district is open to those options for anything that comes available to us at the time. However, at this time, we're not aware of any grants that are available.
Both of those just came due the Obama grant. I mean, we shouldn't call it that, but it was during that era when we were trying to recover from the 2008 recession. The other grant you're referring to was a grant that the Utah State Legislature put forth for rural schools to help with reinforced masonry. And since Grouse Creek was in the situation it was in, we felt like that would be the best use of that fund. So as Mrs. West said, we're always looking at any grant that we can, but usually they're, 4 or 5, 2 million, somewhere like that, just not substantial enough to really make a huge dent into a bond like this.
The next question, Steve, is from Carson, and it asks, what is the bond interest rate and maturity date? And what is the plan as interest rates continue to drop? What is the proposed tax increase percentage to taxpayers?
On the graph, the bar graph that Keith showed earlier, I believe it is 46 is when the bond does mature. And those last 3 years, it does incrementally go down a little bit. As interest rates drop, bond is like a mortgage on your home. You can go back and refinance, so that can be happen. And as far as the proposed tax increase percent to taxpayers, we've not figured out what the exact percent is. We do know that, once again, to repeat, on a $450,000 home, it's going to go up about $19 a month. And so I'm not sure where the percent is on that. I'm sorry. We could figure that out. That's an issue. Yeah, they'd be able to tell us.
Hey, Ginger said, will this truly be sufficient to meet our needs and numbers for the next 20 years, or is this a Band-Aid? It was only a couple of years ago, one of the board members said new schools wouldn't be needed and that we could just keep adding portables to schools like North Park. So to address that, you can add portables to schools like North Park, and we have added portables to the extent and capacity that that's available and a viable option. However, in the last 5 years, we've had a major growth to the amount of programs that we're offering in our district that is impacting the growth at North Park specifically and many elementary schools across the district. One of those things was that a few years ago, the state came in and did an audit and let our special education department know that one of the things they'd like to see us change as a district is to implement pre-K into all of the elementary schools or local elementary schools, and to close down the early learning center that we had at the time. The reason for this was that it's better transition for those students and they have more opportunities to learn when there's inclusion opportunities within the schools. So that increased the number of classrooms being used in our elementary schools. Additionally, the state rolled out all-day kindergarten, which doubled the number of classrooms needed for kindergarten and eliminated many of our computer labs to address that growth. Another evidence of growth of programs that we've seen is that special education has twice as many students being served by an IEP in the last 5 years. And that takes up more space, more classrooms, more equipment, more resources, more itinerant offices for speech and communication planning. The other thing that on the north end and at North Park specifically that has changed is the implementation of DLI over the last few years. Essentially adds a couple of classrooms every year as that program is being rolled out, and it has a major impact. So portables are a viable option to a point when there's a couple. We have 34 across our district, and we've also had to combine classrooms, eliminate classrooms such as art, music, and computer labs in order to address the needs. So while we can do some things to address and respond to the growth of programs or the addition of general education classrooms, we can't overlook it too long. What we can do is make sure that these plans for building allow us to add on in the future that the growth is necessary. As we've said, our stakeholder input will have a lot of say on what plans our architects present and make available. We've seen this with Garland Elementary and 3 Mile Elementary. Both had additions included in their original plans, as did building. Building hasn't had that portion added on yet, but we'll likely see that in the future as they're beginning to request portables. Thank you so much to everybody contributing to the questions so that we can respond to these. If you don't feel like they're answered thoroughly, please feel free to add a follow-up question. The next one asks, are stakeholders going to have a say in the design of the new schools? Keith?
The answer is yes. Obviously, there's lots of variety. We know that they have to hold 3 grades, or the 9th grade has to be added on to the high schools, or the remodeling of the intermediate schools to become the elementary schools. But I've already had several conversations with teachers, which are the ones that are teaching currently every day in the old buildings, and they're like, man, I wish we could. How come if I plug this in and I got 3 of them, I lose power? And this is, so I want you to know that we're going to take seriously the input of those that are on the front line doing a great job teaching all of our lessons for us to make the decisions at the district level without input from those that are doing the job, people working in the buildings, and then parents' input. it would be short-sighted of us. So the answer to that is absolutely yes. Now, are we gonna be able to satisfy 65,000 voters or members in our community? Probably not, but we're gonna listen a lot. We're gonna take a lot of notes. We're gonna listen to good ideas. We're gonna give them to our architects. They've got a lot of experience building buildings as well. They do it all the time, every day. Someone who has that kind of foresight on, this is a snag, if you do this is probably a struggle. But using input of how do we prepare for future classes, future jobs that have never been created yet, is exciting and also problematic. But we are going to use and have that. So certainly, yes. And our plan is come, if the bond passes, that come January, the gathering of feedback, information, and sitting down with an architect to come up with a building would be part of our go and do's immediately.
Okay, while I answer the next question, I'm gonna have Keith Meekum share his screen and show some things on our district website. So the next question from Cassidy, is there a way to review this video after the meeting is over, and can we share it to other friends? We, on our Box Elder School District website, at the very top on the right-hand side, you will see a tab that says bond information. If you click on that, you'll go to an entire page that shows information about the bond, and we are linking informational videos as well as town hall meeting videos to that. There also, if you go to YouTube, you can search for Box Elder School District and click on our page there and see any of the town hall videos that we've had made available. So yes, you're welcome to go to the website and click on the video, grab the link and share that with your friends. And I'm going to repeat that now that Keith is sharing his screen. It never hurts to hear it twice, right?
Where would that go?
To the Box Elder School District website.
Oh, hello, I can do this. Well, sorry, let me do. Good night. Give me 1 second.
Steve, will you read the purple icon one and have that turn on next?
Yeah.
Okay, so on BESD.net.
I've got to now show it.
Okay, I can see it because I'm sitting next to him. I
Yeah.
apologize to those. of you
Now
virtual
we
land.
are, I apologize.
On the top right-hand corner, there's that blue banner, and one of those tabs says bond information. If you click on that tab on the banner, you can scroll down on this page. And as you keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling to the part that is in blue, you will find there's a link for the town hall meetings there. And if you keep going, we have also videos that are linked below that give more information on this, as well as some other interesting things, such as we click on financial history.
Yeah.
You can find what the county tax rates are by your area and just different informational videos there.
Robert, our technician, when will this be uploaded to this site? Tomorrow, the next day?
Today's recording.
Today's recording this.
Right now it is being uploaded to YouTube.
Okay,
And so all we'll have to do is add that link, whether we want to do it before we go home tonight or first thing in the morning,
okay, so really soon.
very, very soon.
Okay,
It
thank
doesn't
you.
take much.
Thank you.
And it's public on our YouTube channel under the playlist Bond. So they can find that very easily right now. So,
Thank you.
All of these videos have been shared on the school district Facebook page as well. So those are an easy way to share them with friends and neighbors is from the Facebook page.
Our next question is from an iPhone user. Why hasn't the school district stood by its policy on teacher degradation, especially with how the principals and HR are part of it and how it affects our children? This meeting is about the bond in particular, but we would be happy to answer and address those types of questions. There's some specifics that are left out here that make it difficult to respond appropriately. We also need to protect some of our personnel records, and so reach out to the school district.
Yeah,
and
if you
we'd be happy to
wanna
address
email
that.
Keith Meekum, Keith.Meekum, KEITH.MECHAM@BESD.net, or my cell number, 435-730-4659. If you'll call us, we'll answer your question. Obviously, we, don't promote this. We want to ensure that all of our employees feel appreciated, supported. We also have an obligation to teach all students. And obviously, some rules have also changed about can kids stay in school and, you know, can you send them to court and all the things. There's just a lot of information to your question. And since it's not bond focused, I would love to gather more information and answer your questions. So again, text me, email me, communicate with Heidi Joe. We'll be glad to answer your questions.
Next question, from Chad Curl. I know it was stated that a survey went out about getting rid of the intermediate schools and sending the 11-year-olds to school with 8th graders. Your survey said people wanted this change. People I have visited with love the current system. Why was this huge decision made with some small random survey instead of a survey to all of the county? We are all paying for this bond, and I think the survey would have been more reliable if all parents and grandparents of kids in the system could have been asked. I feel like this is just another example of why people do not trust the district leaders. Why do a sneaky survey instead of a one for all involved? So Chad, what we did was we hired Y2 Analytics to conduct the survey independent of us. And what they do is they have a sample group of voters who are likely to represent the overall group of voters. And that information came from them. Another consideration in that was also the fact that if we were to replace 2 elementary schools, both North Park and Lakeview, that cost would be about $45 to $50 million to taxpayers per building. Add on to that many of our elementary schools would then need additions as well if those schools were built to house about 600 to 800 students. And that could come at a cost of $5 to $10 million for 7 additional elementary schools. That would bring us up to another $150 million on this bond. And the intent of the school board and district leadership was to minimize the impact on the taxpayers. So using those intermediate schools as elementary schools allows us to address more problems with the lower cost and be more conservative. Additionally, another thing that it addresses, as we've mentioned, is that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are banded together now for instruction with their standards. What that means is that standards for algebra are similar between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Similarly to fractions are used in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. So it makes it so that those teachers have a better ability to collaborate and ensure that students are getting continuity in their instruction and that all, that they're more successful. Any board member want to add on to that?
I would add on that if elementary, so say if 6th grade went back to the elementary, they would lose out on their elective opportunities that they have now, such as band and orchestra, choir, those would go away. So I know a lot of parents who think they would feel more comfortable with their 11 and 12-year-olds back in elementary, but I personally like that mine has that opportunity for those extra elective classes in 6th and 7th and 8th grade. I also feel, from my perspective, that 6th graders are more emotionally immature comparatively to 7th and 8th graders instead of with the kindergartner. The survey, we wanted it to come from professionals like Y2 and how they know, who they need to look for, how to reach different categories, of ages of people, genders, parents, grandparents. They really did a really good job of reaching out to a variety of people in the county instead of a random sample. Instead of, as a district, our access is only to parents and employees.
I think just something that's interesting to me is a parent from a school community council said that she spoke to a number of children that were at her house that were 7th grade. And all of the students except for one had agreed that they would not want to go have their 6th grade put back in the elementary schools. Those students would prefer to be in intermediate and middle schools. They want to be with seventh and eighth graders, not with sixth graders. There was one student who did say that they would prefer to be in elementary. The next question is, I understand that what is being paid toward the 2007 bond will be wrapped into this new bond in 2030, but that doesn't look like it's enough to meet the need repayment requirement. I.e., how are we going to jump from $3 million to $17 million? I know that the new taxes will help get us there, but please explain the 4-year gradual steps up to $17 million payment when the new property tax will be turned on in just 1 year. Are you expecting tax proceeds to increase each year? Is that money coming from somewhere else, or is the repayment amount less the first few years because you haven't withdrawn money yet as projects are just getting started?
I think you've kind of answered your own question with the end of your question. But we work with Zions Bank, they're the public finance department. They prepare these documents all the time, and they make sure that that $17 million will cover it. And as you sell bonds, you actually only sell bonds as they are needed. And so you don't just sell the one big bond for $220 million that first year, but they're sold gradually as the need arises, as we withdraw money. And so I think it's pretty much, you did that's a great question, but you did answer it a little bit by, we just withdraw as we need it.
Also, Jason, I want to add, I just did a simple $17 million times 20. And you do not want to do that number. It is 340 million. So just like when you buy a home and you look like by the end of the payoff date, if we just paid it over the 20 years, what is our house? How much are we going to pay? We generally buy a house for a third additional cost of what we bought it for because of interest. Obviously, we want to have the lowest interest rate. If lowest interest rates drop, we can refinance just like a homeowner can refinance. And so we're always looking for the best rate and situation and paying this off as fast as we can without, putting our district in jeopardy financially. So again, thank you for that. Hey, Tyler, thanks for, and again, all of you, you've been awesome, your patience. We're trying to get to all of these, but thank you for your questions. This one comes from Tyler. Would you consider an alternate plan for Bear River Middle? Buy 40 to 50 acres somewhere and build a new Bear River High, then move the middle school into the current Bear River High. We would have 2 bear centers, fields, and other related facilities. Obviously, I don't know if you've learned, but recently a Westfield High School in Weaver School District has been purchased. Had been built, and it just went on board. And that price was $120 million for that high school. So having 2 of those, or one on one end, and just so you know, to have all those extra facilities, although again, I like it, but to have a bear center and a football field and a track and a baseball and a softball field with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that don't use it really is paying for things that would probably not be good use of the public fund. But that has been talked about actually in some of our discussions as, do you make the high schools middle schools? Do you make the intermediates middle schools? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, and really our fairest, best price to meet our needs is the plan that we're offered. But we have looked at that, and thank you for thinking outside the box a little bit.
Middle schools are the cheapest per square foot to build.
Correct.
So that lets us do the most with the money and address all the projects we need.
The next question is, how are contracts decided with contractors, builders, suppliers, etc.? Corey will answer this one. And how can we be assured that top dollar isn't being spent for each part of the process? On a similar note, what if not all of the bond money is needed? Will taxes go down?
So as a public entity, and we're using tax dollars, we have to follow state procurement rules. We do get audited, and we have to make sure that all of our finances are used to the best of our ability. The process we go through is I put out an RFP on a state level. The contractors interested would then put in their proposal, and we have done that. That's how we secured the current contractors that would do the work on the middle schools for this bond. We would do the same process for the high schools on this bond. So in that, it's a CMGC, a contract or a construction manager, general contractor. We don't just want the cheapest price because we want the best service for the best price. So we're trying to find that balance, that what we're getting is the best value for our dollar. And then those general contractors, construction managers, in conjunction with the architect, would go out to bid with subcontractors in each of the trades to find the best value for the dollars that we're spending. In the long run, if we just go with the cheapest out there, that doesn't mean it's the best, but the most expensive doesn't mean that's the best either. So we try to find that balance as far as quality and the right price for that service and that product. Let's see, the other part.
What if not all of the bond
So-
money is needed? Will taxes
so-
go down?
So I'm not sure if it's been stated in this meeting or not. This $220 million price tag for the bond, it's not our pie in the sky. It meets the basic needs that have been determined. So if there's extra money in the bond that we have no need for throughout any of the district, my understanding is we just don't take that money out of the bond.
We don't buy those bonds.
We don't buy those bonds. But when we start talking about those 5 different priorities and we get down to what does Discovery and Century Elementary and Fielding need, after all of these other things are done, unfortunately, we're afraid that there won't be enough money in the bond to take care of all 5 of those priorities. But if I always say it this way, if all the stars align and the prices come in incredibly to the point that we could meet all of those needs, fantastic. And then if all of those needs are met and we've only spent $200 million, then yeah, we just want to take out the other amount.
I think something to tack on to that is, that Century has some unreinforced masonry, Discovery and Building both could use additions. Discovery has portables currently, as does Century has a portable, and Building has requested portables and would like to see an addition out there. So we would be able to address more of the needs. But we would not be able to spend money on anything that's not listed here in the priorities list.
And those numbers are estimates because we have not picked the design for the building. It has not gone out to bid. Those are our best guess of what current middle schools cost to build.
Which is a great segue to our next question from Bruce, which says, when Ogden School District asked for bond money, they had architectural plans ready before the bond proposal to show voters. Why hasn't the district done this?
I'd like to respond to that, Bruce. That's a great question. First of all, we also have had people saying, are we going to be able to have input on this? So if we were to say, this is our building and this is how it's going to look and this is how it's going to be designed, then we'll also have people in the community that says, how come we didn't get any feedback? How come you've already got it all predetermined? We want you to know that we have hired an architecture company called BCBO, and they have built many middle schools. They have multiple designs. And now with the feedback of what we're going to have with our stakeholders, now we can say, okay, teachers, what does this look like? Oh, we have people saying 6th grade should kind of be its own wing. Okay, let's pick a design where 6th grade is its own wing and maybe, we can limit interaction with 8th grade. So we could do that, And we're ready to move, but we would like to have input from all stakeholders. As you continue to give us great questions and good information, we can make the thing that makes sense with the input of our stakeholders. And again, I've said this before, and I think you understand this. We're not going to make everybody happy. Even, you know, if you have a strong feeling, again, good information will eventually help us have great output. And so we thank you for that.
Okay, Mitch just said, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that you were open to suggestions. We want to be open to that too. Thank you, Mitch. Glenn said, it has been 17 years since the board put a bond on the ballot, right? How often do other nearby districts ask their residents to approve bonds? That's accurate, Glenn. It has been 17 years, and previous to that bond 17 years ago, it was about 14 years for that. So, and asking other districts around about how long theirs have been, I've heard a range of about 8 to 10 years is typical what some of my cohorts across other districts are telling me that they go to bond about that often.
And I think it's important to know, Glenn, again, a great question. You know, people that go a little sooner are having major influx of businesses and bodies, students. And when those are happening, it's obvious like we got to build an elementary and then a middle and a high school, because all of a sudden we have this whole new town that we didn't know about. Again, that could turn into Box Elder County in the future. We'll have to be prepared for that. But we do know this, our bond right now is we're getting rid of 4 buildings that were built 62, 62, 65, 65, 60 plus years ago. And so the purpose of this bond is to get rid of what we currently have that is unsafe and unreinforced, but also plan for the future for the growth in case we have an Alpine School District crazy or West Weber School District, a brand new city that no one really knew was going to be a city 5 years ago. And we'll have to be nimble on our toes and watching that as it comes forth.
So to be a little bit more specific on that, so Weber since 2006 has had 4 bonds passed, so 3 since ours passed in 2007, and Cash has had 2. Just to get some more balance on that clarity. The next question is, if this bond doesn't pass, the need will still be there to improve our schools. What would the board's plan be if this bond doesn't pass? Propose a new one next year, raise property taxes to fund future projects. Would a board member like to respond to that? Not Keith or I.
So if the bond doesn't pass, things continue as they are now. Our teachers and administrators continue doing an excellent job of trying to reach every student. The consequences being, if a bond doesn't pass, is that class sizes will likely go up. So elementary classes are right around 20 students per class right now. And in some of those schools, it could go up to 30 per class. And that just makes it really hard for teachers to reach every student when they have that many in a class. Additionally, other elementary schools that have not lost their computer labs or their art rooms or their music rooms will likely lose those rooms to become regular classrooms. And those classes will then, those teachers, the art teacher, music teacher, will then go into the classroom. So students don't get to move throughout the day for their extra classes.
And teachers don't get uninterrupted prep time.
Yes. What was the second part of that question? So if the bond doesn't pass, that, you know, is the plan that some schools would get more portables. There might be some rebounding that would need to happen possibly to help alleviate the pressure on some of the elementary schools. It does not, there's not really anything we can do to address the unreinforced masonry if the bond doesn't pass.
And would you raise property taxes to fund future projects?
That is not something we can really, like, that's yet to be seen. It's was something we do truth in taxation every year, and we don't make that decision until we've looked at the budget, looked at what the exact needs are.
If there was a raise to taxes through to truth in taxation, could it cover the cost of this extensive project?
No.
There's no way.
What is the limit on truth in taxation? I don't know, but
I think we could probably raise 3 or 4 million, 5 million a year, so it's just.
It's not even enough to build one more school.
I will say though that we have talked about a backup plan. But the feedback from the voters are gonna be really important for us of why? Why did you say no? If the no was because it's too much, I will tell you that right now costs are going up, according to our architects, about 7 to 10% per year. So if cost is too much, that's gonna be a problem because the cost isn't gonna go down. It's probably gonna go up a little bit. But I will also say, everything will have to go back onto the drawing board. Like, okay, maybe reconfiguration isn't the plan. We'll have to get the feedback of what we're doing. And so, but I will promise you, we're not gonna tell you what our plan B is, because plan A is this. We feel it's fair. We feel it's meets our essential needs. Not all of our needs. I mean, if we didn't all of our needs, this could have been well over 300 million, but we know that that is not, we're not shooting for pie in the sky here. So great question again, Ginger.
Well, and it's not that we're not going to tell them a plan B. We don't have a plan B.
Yeah.
Our plan is to pass this.
Right.
And
But I mean,
that's what
a
we're
plan B
looking for.
will be determined what next step is, and we could go right back to the, for next year and go right back into, and we'll do this again, and maybe we tweak, or maybe we come back, you know, the same, but certainly a plan will be put in place.
One of the reasons we voted to put it on the ballot and give voters the chance to decide this year, being cognizant of the difficulties of financial and of the economy, is that the prices are not going down, and we felt like waiting would just cost the district more, cost taxpayers more money. So Golden Spike cost 27 million to build. And that went out to bid 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
22.
So, and currently elementary schools are closer to the $45 million range.
35 to 40.
35 to $40 million range. So in 5 years, they're costing about 9 million, $10 million more. So if we waited next year or the year after that, you know, it just, the cost of the bond will continue getting larger, even though the number of projects we can do will stay the same.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Ginger. It says, there was a rumor going around that Box Elder did a very expensive survey on if the bond would pass or not, and that it found that the bond would not pass. True? What happens next if the bond doesn't pass? Is there a backup plan?
Can I answer that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, Cache Valley School District passed a bond a year ago, and so we did a lot of discussion with them on some of the things that they did, and so we followed much of their plan. And one of the things they did do was they did a request for proposals from survey companies. And when we put that out, there were 3 companies that put in the bids, and Y2 Analytics out of Ogden was the company that won this bid. When they came and proposed to tell us what they would do, there were some things, and just so you know, this is not a rumor, there was a company hired. This company came in and in, I believe it was August, did 4 focus groups, not only with the survey's been mentioned earlier, but they also.
In August, we voted in August to go.
Okay, so was it
So
July?
Would have been.
It was the summer.
Yeah.
June, July, okay,
The focus groups were about April, May,
April,
right?
May.
And
Were they
June,
that early?
July was the survey.
okay. So the four focus groups, we had 2 in the north, and they were held, the analytics company told us was, it's best if you have gender neutral, or not gender neutral, you have gender like groups. And so one group was a group of women, and another group was a group of men in the north. I believe they were held at this Senior Citizen Center. Is that where we held those? And then also we had that same configuration in the south at USU Brigham City. And the questions that were asked in the survey were similar, very similar to the questions that were asked on these focus groups. And as they went through, these focus groups pointed out much of what the survey did. One of the things was there was a liking from 3 of the 4 groups fairly strongly that they wanted to go to the reconfiguration from the 4 groups to the 3 groups, the K5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. Also in the survey, we didn't mention this earlier, but the survey was done once again by Y2 Analytics. who's a professional surveying company. They did a random survey and they sent it out and they got response from 400 people. And of those 400 people, just a little bit over 200 people had either children or grandchildren in the survey. And so when they came back with their information, they very much represented what they felt like is a strong representation. I mean, these are the same people that are out doing, you know, focus groups and surveys for what's going on in our country right now with all the elections. One of the things that we need to point out is that this company, we also had the survey go out to ask for $250 million and $220 million. In the $250 million survey, we also added a B center that's similar to the Bear Center, but a B center in the south and a competitive gym, a new competitive gym for Bear River High School up in the north. That would have added $30 million to the bond. We found out that it was the low 40s that people wanted to do that in both of those focus groups and in the survey. When they did the focus groups and they asked about the 220 million, right off the bat, one of the very first questions they asked in the focus groups and the survey was, if Box Elder School District were to propose a $220 million bond, how would you feel about voting for that bond? And right off the bat, it was similar in both the focus groups, and even though they didn't take numbers as well, but they had a raise of hands and we were able to watch those focus groups on videos. They, in the survey, when the question was asked right off the bat, would you, without any information, be willing to pass a bond for 220 million? About 46% of the people being surveyed were less than likely to vote yes. Then during the survey, there were a variety of questions asked and there was more explanation put into it. What was going to happen? 2 new middle schools, grade configuration, additions to the high school, CTE work. And by the end of that, about a 20-question survey, by the end, they asked the question again. Now, having taken this survey and seeing how much, you know, the $220 million would cover, how do you feel now about the possibility of a $220 million bond? Those same people were now up to about 56%, 58%. And so you can see that we felt like that people just listening to it cold, when you hear the 220 million, was just too much of a shock. But when you were informed, by the time you went through a 20-minute survey, or excuse me, a 20-question survey, which probably took 15, 20 minutes, just that much information allowed the people to change their minds a little bit. We felt like, the board did, staff, district staff felt like, if we had an opportunity to go out and explain things like we tried to do with all the videos and the town halls, what we're doing, that we could make sure that more than half the people were very interested in passing this bond. I will tell you another thing, that Box Elder School District's yearly budget is $150 million. This bond we're asking for is $220 million. Y2 Analytics' final bill was $42,000. Now it's not a rumor. We went out, we got them. I think it's money well spent. It was a decision that we needed to make, the board needed to make, and know if this is something that could possibly happen. And Y2 Analytics gave us the information that yes, if you went out and informed the people who vote, they will see what you need and go for it. So I hope, did you guys think I covered everything in that? So
Thank you, appreciate it.
thanks.
The next is a comment from Chad. Just want to be clear, I do not want 6th graders in elementary. Just wanted to know why we aren't all being surveyed when you are gathering information about such a huge decision.
I want you to know, Chad, that's a great question. I mean, to try to get a survey response, it would seem like we would just get lots and lots and lots of people. It's interesting, these individuals that do this for a living, they know what the end size has to be. They know what the representative has to be. It was interesting, out of the 400 respondents, 200 had kids in school. So, but how would have we ever really been able to digest all of who are we getting? We have all the emails of parents that have kids in school, but we don't have all the emails. And so now it goes on social media, how many people vote. White's Analytics, they do this all the time to ensure randomness and across the board with all voters. Whereas if you go out just randomly, they had the list of likely voters. We don't have the list of likely voters. So hiring a company that actually does this all the time makes the numbers a lot more reliable. But to your point, Chad, I didn't get a vote on that either. Because it was just a random sampling of how do people feel across the board. We feel like based on Y2 Analytics, other projects that they've done and the numbers they've been able to recommend and input they've been able to give, we felt like it was a solid investment for what we heard from them.
And as a board member, I feel like it was very valuable. We received very good feedback from those focus groups and from the comments and stuff on those surveys that let us know how a lot of the community felt and different information that some issues that maybe we hadn't thought of. I felt like it was valuable and the money was well spent. If, in contrast, if we would have done our own survey, that is, we don't have quite the setup that Y2 does to make sure it is verified information, not repeat and information. And it also takes away time from our district office and administrators of doing the jobs that they need to be doing every day.
Thank you. Next, Jenny asked, how will the funds be distributed between the two areas? Will it be fair? In the past, it seems like Brigham ends up with more of the money.
I'd like to take that one. Jenny, it's a great question. One thing you need to understand is I think our board is very, very cognizant of trying to be equitable, but equitable does not mean equal. And the reason I say that is this, Bear River High's enrollment is 1,200-ish. Box Elder's Heights is 1,600-ish. Currently, Box Elder Middle School, its enrollment is 1,100-ish. Bear River Middle School is 825. There's 300 plus more students at Bear River Middle or Box Elder Middle than Bear River Middle. So when it comes to the more enrollment you have to have more classrooms. And since the two ends of the district are not equal in enrollment, we have to then divide the money up so that we can get the right classrooms to get all the students that are coming into these new buildings. But other than that, we are going to try to be as equitable as we can to meet the needs of both ends of the district. This really is not a we favor one end or the other. If this was flopped and flip-flopped, not flopped, flip-flopped, and Tremont Garden was the bigger school, Brigham City would be the smaller school. And if that was the case, the money would be switched. It has nothing to do with like or dislike, favoritism or not. It has to do strictly with enrollment.
The population on the south end would be higher to indicate that we generate more funds from the taxes on the south end as well.
The 2007 bond, that is why they didn't receive equal amounts of money.
It was straight because of enrollment.
Great, it's based strictly on.
Strictly on enrollment.
That same thing happens with the rest of the budget with the weighted pupil unit of how we get funds from the state. It goes to how many students are in each school. Trust lines money is also distributed that way based on how many students are in each school.
Thank you, Jenny. That was a
Really
great
good
question
question.
for us to
Can I
address.
say one more thing on that?
Love
And I think that people need to understand that, for example, when we built Sunrise High School, that benefited, even though it's in Brigham City, that benefited both ends of the district. And so sometimes just because something's necessarily built in one place doesn't mean it does not benefit both.
Same with us.
So I think that's important.
Would you say that louder, please, Catherine?
And that's the same with the ILSC, our post-high program. It provides services for all students in the entire county, not just those in Brigham City.
And students that live in Tremont and are bused to Sunrise or the ILSC.
Correct. Yep, they receive transportation to get to either Sunrise or the ILSC. So even though it may be located here in the Brigham City area, it does provide education for students all over our county.
Thank you. The next question is, with the new school safety requirements and future requirements for hardening of campuses, is there going to be a need for tax increases for those fixes? Or are those expected to be given by grants from the state?
So they've asked me to address this. So it's HB 84. It's a new House bill that is just taking effect this year. There are things that need to happen with our campuses, but we are coordinating with the state security chief and our district safety and security specialist, along with all the schools, as to what is needed there. Each school may need something different. There is a safety audit that is required by each school. Those are currently being compiled. They're due by the end of December, but we're not waiting until then. Those are in the works right now. Once those are completed, then there will be some grant money from the state that can be requested. The other requirements will be covered along the way with our current capital reserve. We work on our buildings every year to maintain and update those. One of the things that is being addressed is secure entrances. We now have those in every one of our elementary schools, in our 2 intermediate schools, and at Bear River Middle School. Box Elder Middle School, we're trying to address that, and Box Elder and Bear River High Schools. So that's one of the things. There are other items in there in that HB 84, which if you'd like to read a 1,200-page House bill, you're welcome to. It's quite lengthy. It does go into all those details, but as far as how those will be paid for, it would be a combination of state grants and capital reserve here at our district level. The discussion as far as would we raise taxes to make those accommodations or those alterations, that's not something that we've discussed at this point. However, any new buildings or additions would need to,
Have those safety.
They would be built.
they would be
designed.
built according to those codes that are being developed.
Can I add to that, Corey? Just 2 weeks ago, all of the superintendents meet monthly, and we had an extensive discussion about this with Dr. Rich Nye, who's now the governor's public ed advisor. And he's been working with Chief Pennington, that's the state safety chief,
Security chief.
yeah, security chief. And right now, there's a discussion of whether it's 5 years or 10 years that all of these things have to be put into place. And Representative Wilcox from Ogden is the originator of House Bill 84, and he's being worked with constantly. And I would presume that in the 25 legislative session, we'll see some tweaks, some adjustments, and I'm hopeful of seeing some, a little more leniency on allowing us to have enough time to do that. I say that because if we do have that 5 to 10 years, then we can put that into our yearly maintenance budget to try to get those things done. As Corey said, we've had that in our maintenance budget over the last, I'd say 3 or 4 or 5 years to get all of those single entryway points. The intermediate schools are perfect examples of that, and the elementary schools. And so I think it's going to be a process. There also, last year in House Bill 84, I believe there was close to $90 million that was put into that bill. Now, a lot of that goes for a variety of things, but some of it is going to be grant money. I'm going to assume that this is high enough priority that there'll be more money placed into that bill, and so grants will be available.
Next question is from Bruce. He said, will there be any more in-person bond meetings? I don't have kids and only found out about the bond from KSL TV story. So we've tried to communicate out in ways that would be meaningful and be received by our voters. We ran it in the newspaper. Unfortunately, our connections are not as effective as we'd like them to be when we have a lot of voters, and our main method is on our Facebook page and Instagram and posting it on our website, sending out to all of our employees and to all of our students' parents through email what the town hall dates were. I think we could look at adding another date. One of the things we were trying to do is hold as many of these as possible before the voter pamphlets and the information on this came out. So both of those things should be received in the mail either the last day or two or over the next couple of days, so.
I think you ought to repeat, in case Bruce didn't hear it, about where you can find all that information. I think
Yeah,
very helpful.
that's a good idea. Then Bruce, you could go to the website and
Robert, if you wanna.
get some of that information. Also, you are welcome to reach out to Steve Carlson, Heidi Jo West, or Keith Minkum. We could set up a meeting with you and board members if you'd like, to address your questions. If you go to the Box Elder School District website, in the top right-hand corner, there is a blue banner. On the left side of that, there is a tab for bond information. If you click on that, you can scroll down, and links for all of the town hall meetings that we've held so far will be included, as well as the recordings on YouTube. And if you keep going down further, there are some videos that are listed under each of these blue tabs to address different questions that we've received over the last couple of months since the bond was announced on August 14th. So there's a lot of information on that website that may answer some of your questions, and you are welcome to view the other town hall meetings. Another place you can find those town hall meetings is by going to YouTube and looking for Box Elder School District and click subscribe, and you can view any of our past board meetings there or any of these bond town hall meetings as well.
If we decide to do another town hall in person, it will be announced on our Facebook page and it will be posted on the website.
Marcia Hatch has asked that I let you know that the links for YouTube will be up tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Did that address all of the questions, or is there anyone else that would like to add before we close?
Well, I would throw in there, and I don't know if we mentioned it, but just today in my mailbox, my US Postal Service mailbox, was the bond information pamphlet that is required by law for us to send out. So we've sent those out to all addresses in the district, and that's something that we have to do by law. It has all of our information that was presented tonight,
QR code. That
that goes to all those things. So that should be in every household that has a mailbox or a mailing address or anything like that. So look for that. It's a one-page front and back that gives you tons of information. It's like Keith said, the QR code's on there. So it's required by law. It did, because we're a non-taxing entity, we are, I've just lost the word. Nonprofit entity.
We are taxing.
Yeah, we are a taxing
Taxing
entity.
entity.
As soon as that came out, that didn't sound very good. We're a nonprofit entity, so we do have to pay for it, but it's at a much reduced rate. And so, but it is required by law to send out this voter information pamphlet. And so, that's something that you'll be able to look at and see, in your mail. And just so happens that my ballot came today at the same time that the voter information pamphlet came. So you should see them both of those in the next 2 or 3 days.
Keith and Heidi Jo, are all the questions been answered? Because there were a few in the 6 o'clock hour before I got
We've
back.
addressed.
We
that
addressed
question.
those.
Okay, they just never got more.
I will say that, Bruce, and this is to you and anybody else, we have, since August 14th, what are we now, 2 months? We have been in conversations with a group of 1 to a group of 50 plus on both ends in a variety of settings. We've talked to so many people. We need to talk to more. We would, if you had a group of people you were involved with, a club, a service organization, and you would like us to come, we'll be there. You name the date, the time, and we'll be there. It can be AM, PM, Heck, I'll come at 2 a.m. if I had, a
Yeah,
couple
I'm
people
actually
to talk.
available at 2
Usually I'm
a.m.
always available. But we're here to help. We're willing to go wherever we need to go to get good information, because at the end of the day, we want everybody to vote. We want you to vote. We want your voice to be heard. And by doing that, that gives us great feedback. And then if we win, we keep going. And if it's defeated, then we're gonna find out why it's defeated. And we're gonna make plans to meet the needs of our students. I know this sounds really crazy, and it never really hit me until today when we were out in Tremont at the Senior Citizen Center. This decision for a new middle school, and if we look at the same life, I mean, it's a 60-year building. And that's this, by the time it's gonna be 2090. You guys don't even know what 2090, 2090, it's out there.
When is that?
2090. I'm just saying, and there's a lot of things gonna happen between now and 2090, but back in 1962, when people built Lakeview, did they ever think that in 2024, we're still educating kids coming through with portables, with all the different, I mean, the internet, the computers, it just wasn't even fathomed. So we're gonna do our very best to promote something moving forward, but this is a big deal. It's a good decision, and it's worth investing in, we feel like, because it's gonna bless generation after generation of kids.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Karen Cronin has made the motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Danielle Wright has made the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That's awesome.
That's all.